this opportunity to welcome you all again to another installment of the Parent Information Session. I'm Cindy Yelverton. I am the Developmental Transition Specialist. And today our topic is on financial planning to include trust and the new developed ABEL account. And I am going to not even address that since I'm not very adept at even balancing a checkbook. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about Steve Radigan, our presenter tonight. He is a Charter Lifetime Assistance Planner and Certified Estate Planner. I have known him since the 1980s when transition first became a topic within the federal government and state government for preparing young persons for post-secondary education and life choices. He's also helped as an advocate and has helped build the national organization Estate Planning for Persons with Disabilities, and is a founding member of the National Institute for Life Planning. He has also presented for a number of school districts, including ours, and he is a consultant to many of the HCS, or group home facilities, like Brookwood and Marburg. He is a guest lecturer at the Texas Tech University and the School of Personal Financial Planning. And is also been on the board for the Harris Center for Mental Health and IBD, formerly referred to as the Mental Health Association of Houston, and the Texas Department of Mental Health and Mental Retardation Advisory Board. He's also, in 2005, was nominated to serve on the President's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities. He has been a lifelong advocate for persons with disabilities, especially in the area of those with developmental disabilities. And at this point in time, I am going to hand you over to a wonderful man and a good friend, Steve Radigan.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it. Hold the clapping till afterwards, then you'll be able to tell me if it was any good. Cindy didn't tell you she called me yesterday, or was it yesterday? Tuesday. So Dave, our speaker isn't coming. Do you know anything about the ABEL plan? And I said, well, yeah, I know a little bit, and I'd be happy to come and share it with you. This is going to be an unusual presentation, and it's that way because the topic is massive. The amount of information is massive, and that's why you have those thumb drives, because I'm going to try to hit the high spots, and then at your own leisure you can plug that thing in and get right down to the nitty-gritty. I didn't tell Cindy at the time when she called that I was at the birth of ABEL. In 2007, I was working on a committee at Health and Human Services in Washington as a citizen, not as an employee, and had just presented to the secretary and a number of other dignitaries a presentation on benefits for individuals with lifetime care needs. And the same day, representative from Florida who wrote the initial bill, his office called the secretary and said, we want to do something, we're not quite sure what it is, but we know that individuals with disabilities can only have $2,000 to maintain eligibility for benefits, and we'd like to do something about that, but we don't know what to do. Do you have anybody over there that knows anything about benefits? Well, I got nominated, so I walked over and met for 3 hours and realized that I was at a place for not a revolutionary, but an evolutionary step for the population that you all represent. And from 2007 until the president signed it, December of 2014, I stayed connected with the project. Went to Washington a dozen times. We had a lot of political issues that we had to overcome. We had to get a lot of co-sponsors. And I'm going to take you on that journey because it's an interesting journey, and it's not over. There have been 5 new bills submitted since the new Congress came in that will all improve the bill should all 5 pass. I am not active at this time in any of those, but I'm watching them. But the net result is that if the government doesn't get greedy, this is a tremendous step for you as parents and for your loved ones to be able to accumulate the funds that they need on a daily basis. But again, as I said, the amount of information, when I started to put together my first seminar, I was developing a seminar on this. I had so much information, I couldn't figure out how to do it in a PowerPoint without just glazing over everybody's eyes. So I came to this conclusion that what I do is do a PDF, hit the high points, and give you all the backup. And then if you're interested in some part of it, you can dig deep on your own. And on top of that, you're welcome to call me or email me with any questions, because I think next to Congressman Andrew Crenshaw from Florida, who has since retired, who wrote the original bill, Senators Casey, Hatch, and Kennedy, 2 of whom passed away, Senator Dodd, who is still there, I probably know as much about this bill as anybody in how it impacts families. Plus, there are some other planners like myself that are actually a lot smarter than me, that know how to take these tools and implement them. We're going to talk a little about, I'm going to show you their stuff. I've gotten their permission to use some of the stuff they've created to show you how you can use this tool even as it is today. So anyway, you have the index. You all have your certified bug-free. Certified bug-free. If you have a problem, I will fix it. It is on me, whatever the problem is. I want to first just get through the shameless self-promotion part. Archer Consulting Group is 34 years young. It's been different names. It's been Archer for 10 years. We're a planning advisory firm. We're a one-stop shop for families who want to do planning for the long term. And we work on a consortium basis, which means we have a lot of partners that do different things. On our floor in our building, we have our primary law firm, a group called Hayes & Wilson. best special needs firm in the state. Both partners have kids with disabilities. In the office next to them, we have Feruza and Associates, 24 years of top grade CPA work. She had to retire early because her daughter required too much time at home, and she specializes in special needs. Wonderful resource. The same office, we have benefits by Kim Salerno Charlet, worked for us, for Archer, for 9 years. She is the benefits wizard. And then a couple steps down the hall is our main office. We have a lot of other consortium members that deal with different parts, but we offer every family 60, 90 minutes, no cost initial briefing in our office. We go through our strategic and tactical information to help you understand all the components. We go through the 20, how much are we up to? I need new glasses. 23 issues that comprise a comprehensive plan. And that's a much nicer picture than the one that you got on there. My wife likes it a lot better. That was actually a picture. My 34-year-old daughter was married in October. And I take terrible pictures, as you can tell from the one that's in the thing.
Has something to do with the subject.
That picture is the start of the bride's father's speech. And the wedding was in Vermont. And the father-daughter dance was Lyle Lovett's The Girls in Texas Don't Get No Better. You know, which of course, when you got a group of Massachusetts, where my son-in-law is from Vermont and Boston, so they were a bunch of Yankees. Excuse me if there are any Yankees. So they love that, but anyway, you can just see over my right shoulder something white. And when I got up, we'd worked it out. My son had some Kleenex. He said, "Dad, you're going to need these. You're pretty emotional." And I had a towel hidden. I just said, no, I put the towel over my shoulder. I said, I brought a Texas Kleenex, and threw the towel over, and I smiled, and it came out to be a pretty darn good picture. That's just information on me, and then services that we provide. So if any of you want to avail yourselves, feel free to give us a call. The ABEL Act actually started out in '07 as the Financial Security Accounts for Individuals with Disabilities. That's what it was called until 2009. And its intent was, as I said, to help families that were stuck in that $2,000 poverty limit for their children to be able to come up above it. And if you can see at the second page, bottom right, initially, it was $500,000 was what the accounts could contain before they would impact benefits. So we'd gone from 2,000 to $500,000. I mean, that was a jump. But everybody in the room knew that that $500,000 wasn't going to last. So we spent a lot of time figuring out, like bridge game, what are we going to throw away in one order to get exactly what we want? And that 500 kept getting cut, and it ended up at 100,000. That's where we are. One of the new legislations is going to take that to 250,000. Has about a 10% chance of passing this year. But I think we will see some growth in that. So originally ABEL was FSA. Now the question is, it started out in '07, seems like a pretty good idea. By 2009 we had 102 co-sponsors. By 2010 we had 346. Couldn't get it to the floor. Couldn't get it out of committee. That many co-sponsors. We've got Andrew Crenshaw is not a big name. He's a congressman from South Florida. But you've got Casey, Hatch, Kennedy, Dodd, big names, and you can't get it out of committee. You know there's something going on. What was going on was I forgot how to work this, I can't remember, was that there was, and here's the list of the groups, Crenshaw, Casey, Hatch, that eventually became Casey, Hatch, Kennedy. Unfortunately, Senator Kennedy passed away before the bill passed, and then you had Dodd. This is the first page, working draft, that was sent to me by a friend in Baltimore in the Social Security Administration. One of the key aspects that I liked about this bill was that he did not put it in Social Security law. He put it in tax code. But that didn't make Social Security Administration happy. Because here was a bill that was obviously going to affect how their programs worked, and they had no way to modify it. But they had a way to keep it from getting to the floor. And what they would do is they would meet twice a month, and they would analyze each of the bills, what had happened in the previous 2 weeks. And you'll notice that the far right corner column is blank. My friend felt that he could give me a little bit, but he couldn't give me everything. So they would come up with an action plan of how they were going to keep this thing off the floor. And they were successful in that from 2010 or late 2009 until late 2013. And every 2 weeks they would do this. I've got hundreds of these, and you can read the changes and what they want to do. What happened was that after all the cutting and slicing of the political parts, things that you wouldn't think of, like one of the big issues was, what if grandma wants to put 10 shares of IBM in? No, can't do that, because then no capital gains tax can be paid. Okay, so it's got to be all cash. That's what the rule is. You can only put cash in. So it was all these little political hurdles that you had to jump to get this thing approved by each of the major players to get it to the out of committee. Well, Social Security would come in and they would chat up the legislative aides about the cost of this and the cost of that. And they did a heck of a job. And then after that hurdle, we felt really good. Then we had a second hurdle that we didn't expect. And that was that 4 of the major national support groups each wanted to be the, what's the term I want? They wanted to be the one that everything went through. They wanted to, you know, if it was going to be a national plan, it was going to be, and I'm not picking on any particular group, but it would be run by the ARC, let's say, of the U.S. And we spent a year talking those groups off the ledge and actually forming a coalition to motivate their different local groups to start chatting up their local legislators. And that's what happened, and that's what turned the tide. And so you started to see meetings where the local ARCs and the local autism groups and the family to families and all those groups started to show up at legislative meetings. And these legislators who we'd been in their office, they wouldn't give us time of day, all of a sudden were calling and asking for a little more information because they were feeling the heat. And it got to the point that it was almost comical to start reading stories about how this congressperson had helped write this bill and do all this, take claim and credit for all this. And for years they wouldn't let you in the office. But once they realized the support that it had, that turned the table, and this bill was one of the fastest to go from committee through the 5 steps to approval, and 3 days after it passed, it was at President Obama's desk for signature. And at that point, it was federal law. Now, 529 is in the IRS code. Most of you know of it as for college education, the 529C. This is 529A. Each state runs their own 529. So now this Treasury Department had this legislation signed by the president, and it took them 9 months to come up with regulations that then had to be sent to each state, and then each state had to massage it. And that is an ongoing process. In a little while I'll show you a map of the states, the ones that have plans actually in place. Texas does not. But the good news is the law says you can have an ABEL account for your child in any state that allows out-of-state registration. And so far of the 8 that are open, only Florida, Alaska, and I'm missing one, maybe Kentucky, do not. So you have 5 states that tomorrow, in about 15 minutes, you can open an ABEL account for your child and put up to $14,000 in. And we'll get into some of the nice little secrets and tricks. Tom Begley is a really good special needs lawyer. 10 things you need to know about ABEL. They're state established. We've already talked about that. Texas, when they passed it in Congress in Austin, it was handed over to the comptroller of the state, and he nominated a committee. One of those committee members was supposed to be doing this tonight. They have a good committee. Actually, 2 of them are members or clients of our firm. It's just a very complex issue, and some states just take longer to get things done. The income earned inside of the 529 is income tax-free. The distributions from the plan for your child, if they're used for qualified disability expenses, which I'll define a little later, are non-taxable. So nothing bad so far. The one drawback is that upon the death of the individual, any amounts left in the account will be subject to a Medicaid lien. So if any monies have been spent, a Medicaid waiver, medical assistance only Medicaid, any of the Medicaid, 12 Medicaid programs, they will do what's called a Medicaid sweep, and if there's money in the account, they will take it out first, and anything left will go to whoever is named as remainder beneficiary. Individual can only have one account. The contribution level is currently at $14,000 for this year. There's a bill in to double it. The disability had to be diagnosed prior to age 26, which includes their the day they became 26. And for the purposes of SSI and Medicaid, it's a non-countable asset. So it does not count against them if they're on a Medicaid waiver, they're just getting SSI Medicaid until it reaches the $100,000 amount. That's contributions plus interest earned. At that point, then SSI would be suspended, not terminated, would be suspended. Medicaid would continue. So if they're on a Medicaid waiver, they're on HCS and getting SSI and Medicaid, and the account hits $101,000, the next month they would not be eligible for an SSI check, but they'd still get their Medicaid and they still get their HCS. And we're hoping that, again, those limits would go up. Each state has its own maximum amount that can be in 529. Texas is $375,000. Going to be hard to get to at $14,000 a year unless the interest rate is phenomenal. But as we see how this program works out, that is going to become an interesting issue about the maximums, because if your kid is working and you're able to put 14 grand in and it earns a reasonable interest, do you really worry about the monthly check when you can have a growing account that's growing tax-free with tax-free non-taxable distributions? So there's a lot of great potential there. Oh, I can't even read that. Excuse me a second. This heck getting old. Better. Advantages and disadvantages. Great advantage, low cost setup. We happen to like the Ohio plan called the Stable. It's on your index list. I believe the setup charge is $50. It's an uncountable resource, tax-free income. The drawbacks, again, are the Medicaid payback, contribution limit. Prior to age 26 has been a big contention with the advocacy groups. And some of the bills that are now in this Congress might have passed last year had it not been for the resistance to the fact that they did not address the age 26. The support groups withdrew their support for the bills because of that. I think that was a mistake, but you get what you get. It can't exceed 100,000. And again, the loss of the SSI and qualified disability expenses has a certain term. Now, you've noticed I've gotten this far into it and we haven't said anything about Social Security Administration. And so far they've been extremely quiet, almost scarily so. I did a piece in December for our clients talking about some of the utilization ideas. And this first one and the last one were the things that I first saw in the bill that I saw as evolutionary. If you have an individual who's getting 733 last year of SSI, and they want to save money, but how many of you have kids who are on SSI? All right, so you know the monthly struggle. You know, you always got to remember the date that the check comes, how much is in the account. You don't want to go over 2,000 because they're going to dun you at some point for the overage. Going to ask you to pay it back. So what I told families is that for the first 11 months of the year, let the kid put all their excess money into the account. If they're paying you some money for room and board, and they end up with 300 or 400 bucks left, and you're worried about the next month, let them push it over into their ABEL, and keep doing that until the end of November, and just to see how much they can get into it, because then you've got all of December to either put money in yourself, or if grandparents or other family members or friends want to contribute, they do it in December. That way the individual that's working gets to maximize the plan, and you don't end up in that cycle where it's time to go out and get another 3 set of sneakers, because if we don't, we're going to go over $2,000. So for the first 10, 11 months, just let the individual put their own money in, and then in December you handle whatever you want to do to fund it. It's great for small inheritances and small personal injury lawsuits. Happen all the time. Somebody will leave $5,000, $10,000. Now you've got a place where you can put it. The rules of Medicaid are that if you're eligible on the first minute of the month, and at the end of the month, the last minute, your income level, asset level is still under $2,000, you don't lose eligibility for that month. So unless the check comes in at the last day after work hours, you've got the whole month to get rid of that money, as long as it's still under the $14,000. You always have to worry about that $14,000 limit. Do any of your kids, those of you who have SSI, get a reduced amount because of they can't pay their fair share? They get $400. Well, now you can. I'll show you on the next page. Let me hold off on that. The final one here. A family that wants to give their kid a little more autonomy and control of money without it impacting their benefits can use the ABEL account to do that, because again, it's a non-countable asset. What I like about Ohio is they give you a debit card that you can go online, and through a dashboard you can limit how much money they have access to. So for those who are more high functioning and you're constantly worried about, well, we really can't give them cash or any of that, now you can start helping. This is part of the socialization aspect of this program. They can get more involved in maybe paying some of their own expenses, get a little more involved in the things that the schools teach on how to handle money and all that type of thing. A special needs trustee can actually make contributions directly to an ABEL account if that carries that autonomy one level more. So instead of having the beneficiary have to call the trustee every time they need 30 bucks or 50 bucks, they can put it into the ABEL, have the debit card. The bank gets, or you get, or the trustee gets an electronic record of what it was spent for, and it makes life simple. Here is the piece on the reduced SSI. For those of you who haven't been through that, the full benefit for SSI this year is $735. If it's determined by Social Security that your child cannot pay their fair share of the costs of the household, then they reduce the benefit by a federal maximum of 1/3 of $735. It's called the in-kind support and maintenance rule. And a lot of folks get caught up in that. It's kind of a funny system. You're paying the bill and they're keeping the money. But it's hard to overcome if people have big mortgages, and all that stuff counts. And if there are only 1 or 2, 3 people in the house, it's whatever those cumulative bills are divided by that number. And if it's greater than the $735, they're going to keep the $245. So now with the ABEL, a parent can put some seed money into an ABEL account. The child is the owner of the account, can use that money plus their supposed full benefit of $735 to pay, quote, their fair share. Their fair share is $810. They can pull out $70 from the account and say, here's the $735 coming from you. They've got the ABEL account. We're taking $80 out, putting it together, and that's his fair share. So he's due the full benefit. You give us our $245 back. And that's just one of the many little nuggets that this has. And I made an example here. If a parent seed an ABEL account with $2,500 and the beneficiary uses an amount necessary to qualify for the full benefit, by simple math, that generates a 10% tax-free rate of return on that seed money. So the $2,500, in essence, allows for an increase of $245 in monthly benefit. And then when you have the add in the interest and all of that for the year, your return on investment becomes closer to 25%. So there's some more information on that included in here. Probably one of the smartest thinkers in the business is in California, ponytail and all, but he's got a great sense of how this plan works, and obviously he's talking about the California plan. California, it has a little more impact in that California adds $285 on top of the $735. So he talks a little more about that in here than what we need to talk about, but he goes through some of the same stuff I've just talked about, but he gives some great examples that I'm not going to go into great detail. But here I've highlighted the housing piece, the in-kind support, his approach to it, which is pretty much my approach. He lists the things that are counted as mortgage, taxes, rent, heating, gas, electricity, water, sewer, garbage removal. And he gives a little better example of how to deal with it if you're going through it. On top of that, he also includes the actual citations from the Social Security Bible called the Palms, so that if you run into trouble at Social Security office, you can help them out by directing them to the actual rules that Social Security has already put in place. He talks about qualified disability expenses. He's got some wonderful stuff in here that is well worth the read. And he comes at it, even though he's an attorney, he really comes at it from some unique angles, using the ABEL with a special needs trust. He's got some really ingenious ideas about how to do that based on the current rules. So I included that. He gives a lot of good links. It says California, but the rules are pretty much federal. There's a section in here from Chris Collier out of Cincinnati, who's a really good planner, long-time planner, and he talks about the differences between a special needs trust and an ABEL account, because people are now asking, well, is the ABEL the death knell of this special needs trust? Do we need those trusts anymore? The short answer is yes, but Chris does a great job of giving you what each one does well, what each one doesn't do as well, and why you should have both, and how then to use them to your best advantage. So there's, again, some really good thinkers out there that have put together already some excellent ideas on the two. Protected Tomorrows, she put together I only used one of her slides, but it shows the third-party special needs trust, which is money that you would usually, the third-party trust is what you would usually create in your estate plan. The first-party trust is when an individual has their own money and has to put it into trust. Pooled trusts. We have an excellent pool trust in Texas, the ARC Master Pool Trust out of Austin. I hope that they're the ones that the committee for the comptroller chooses to run our program, because they already have all the components in place. Plus, they're already managing something like $90 million of trust money, and they also already use the debit card. So I'm very hopeful that they will take the advice of those who have given it. But this is a great kind of side-by-side, what does what, and what can you do with this money or that money. Our friends, the IRS, have already come up with forms. But what I like about this is it's only 3 pages, the instructions. So this highlights, it explains what a qualified disability expense is. It gives all the particular rules as they have interpreted them. It's a typical tax form, except that it's really fairly easy to read, and I think it's going to be pretty simple to complete the form. Obviously, every time you have anything in IRS code and you put money in it, you're going to have to report it. But so far, it looks like the reporting requirements are going to be minimal. This has nothing to do with ABEL. It's just a reminder that many of the costs that you incur on behalf of your child may develop deductions and credits against your income tax. And there are actually 2 forms that they put out, excuse me, 907 and 503, that talk about the credits. The 503 really speaks more to older individuals. A lot of times CPAs, your child gets to be 28, 29, your CPA says, well, you can't take them as a exemption. In many cases you can. You can still claim them as a dependent. And the 503, which I do not have on here, actually has what I like, one of those, it's a chart, I forgot the name of it, but it's one of those, they ask you a question, yes, no, if it's yes, the arrow goes down, no, it goes, and you just follow it. And we provide those to take to their CPAs, and quite a few of them discover, to their amazement, that they could have been taking that deduction, and you can go back 3 years. And so just I put that in there as a kind of a habit. I should have put 503 in also, but that's why we were so anxious to get our CPA on our floor, because she reviews. She was with Ernst & Young for 24 years, a partner, high-end planner, and she can blaze through a return, ask a short form questionnaire, and she can tell you where the nickels and dimes are that you can scratch out of a plan. First client we send to her, they called us 3 days later and said that they were getting $4,700 back, and she'd charged them a $150 fee, and we were hooked. And so it's a good thing to discuss with your CPA, or if you do your own taxes, to go through these types of forms and see if you're capturing all that that you are due. I guess about 15 years ago I did an article with Lynn Weisskopf of Wall Street Journal in the financial section, and the title was the disability surcharge. And it was a great article. Talked about how much on top of normal costs parents with special needs kids have to pay for everything. And if you can find some way to mitigate just that top coverage cost, then that's a good day's work. And that's what we try to do. Let me see if this is where switch over here now. There are two links on Google. This is the National Resource Center for ABEL. This is probably the best. So here's your map, and you can see the states blue that have plans in place. And you can click on the tool, and you can compare states. So we'll take the ones that will take out of state money. Illinois, Ohio, and I don't think Kentucky does. No. So it's Tennessee. And it compares it side by side. Now in states that have, and this is important, for those of you who are either going to be moving, maybe when you retire, if the state you're going to has an income tax, most of these have some sort of deduction. But more importantly, if you've got grandparents, living in Ohio, you can tell them that they get a deduction. Let me see the structure. What's the deduction? I think it's $2,000. No, I can't. I think it's $2,000 on a contribution. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, $2,000. The contribution are deductible for Ohio individual income tax purposes. Now, I don't know a grandparent, for the most part, that came out of, I'm 68, so I can't, the people, when I was younger, I would say grandparents because they came out of the Depression, but most of those folks have gone on. But, you tell a grandparent they can get a $2,000 deduction from their income tax, they happen to live in Ohio, or another state that has income tax, I think they'd be all over that thing. And I would certainly encourage them to take advantage of that. Now, hey, you can set up an account in Ohio tomorrow. We set up 2 today for folks. They can only have 1 account, and anybody can give to it. I mean, I could have put money in these folks' account, so anybody can give to it. So this is a wonderful site. You can see it has additional information. It gives a history, a review of states, other resources. Has a webinar, so you select a state and you can figure out, like Florida is one that does not allow out-of-state, does not allow out-of-state residents. So you can just go through and just, it has all sorts of really cool stuff, and you can get on the mailing list for their updates, and those have been quite helpful. It's right there, and they will update you. The second site is the ARC's site, and they show well, they show a few more states than the other one does. I don't think all those are open. Green is open, so it does the same thing, except it does it in this format. It gives you the links. Yeah, this one not going to be open until summer of 17. Florida's open. It says Florida residents only. National means it'll take Texas folks. So it's a real nice little piece that makes it easy to follow. They also have a newsletter, so you can come and you can click on what will be the Texas ABEL, and you know they've got a pretty nice site so far, but they will continue to work on it, and they list the committee members, and a good bunch of folks. I know most of them, but it's I think they're waiting for some final regulations before they make their recommendation. But so you can, two good sites to for you to look at, sign up. I would sign up for both newsletters. This is the printed version of the first one, and this is a printed version of the second. Gives you all the partners that they worked with, and their booklet is a little more lengthy in that it gives you some more ideas about how to use the ABEL. This is the Ohio plan, the one that we like. The reason we liked it, I forgot how many pages this thing is. It's like 36, but we liked it because they made the investment choices simple. They have 3 Vanguard and a money market account. So they've got what they call long-term, mid-term, short-term, most of them at 0.26 on cost, 26 basis points on cost, 100 basis point being 1%. So 26 bips is a quarter of a cent cost-wise, which is very reasonable. So if you can actually do some strategizing on your investment, if money is going in and you think maybe 5,000 of the 14, you might gonna be leaving that in for 10 years. Well, you might want to take the Vanguard U.S. equity which is, I think, their long-term. I think it did 22% this year. So they've kept that very simple, and they've kept the ability to change simple. Even though the document is long, there's a lot of good information in here. But it's really a simple plan. And they were the first ones to come out with the debit card, which I felt was integral to the success of any of these plans. They even have the debit card. The Arc of Texas has a debit card, and I think Ohio's is switching to the what's called the True Card, where you can not only go online and say, I want $50 in the account, but you can say, if Bobby goes to Sunny or Speedy's or whatever, he can get a Coke and some crackers and gas, but he can't get a beer or a cigarette. You can narrow it, the ability to purchase. Can't get lottery tickets on cards anyway. But, so you can really pinch down what they're able to access with the funds. So again, at some point it gets into the always tedious, anytime you have investments, it's a matter of just loving you to death with words. They do have a great section on Social Security and Medicaid considerations that goes more in depth on that aspect of it. Then they get into the investment options for about 20 pages. But this is our choice right now until we see something that's better. I talked about Social Security. Well, they had to respond, and so they came out. They tasked the Tennessee region. There are 9 regions. We're in the Dallas region, but they tasked Tennessee with coming out with the first set of rules. How many pages? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 pages. The POMS, Program Operation Manual System, is what the individual that you deal with at Social Security uses. So the progression is this. You have legislation. President Obama signed a law. That was legislation. That went through what was called markup, and then it went to Treasury, which converted legislation into regulation. And that process is ongoing. They haven't finished that, but we don't expect. They gave the states permission to open based on the second round of changes. So we don't think there's going to be any surprise. So then Social Security obviously has some skin in this game. I mean, we're now talking about kids who normally, if they got $2,001, you were going to get a nasty letter. Who can now have 100,000. So they had to do something, And so they did what they could. They defined it as they understand it. And they do this in Baltimore at the Center for Medicaid Medicare Services. So they take the regulations and they convert it into something that the local person can then use, because could you imagine them taking, if you've ever seen a marked up bill, and try to figure out how to operate it into something that they can use when they run into a situation dealing with an ABEL. So Baltimore massages it. They come up with this 10 pages that defines what's qualified disability expense, gives you the codes, the how to deal with this, how to deal with that, and the what ifs, and that then is sent to the 9 regions, which then massage it again. So by the time it gets to the Conroe office or the Aldine Bender, it may not match up with what the legislation was or what the regulation was. It's just a fact of life that they interpret it for their caseworkers, but it may not really match up with what some of the original law was. You will think, well, how can this be? How can this be? In 1983 was the big overhaul of Social Security. And that's back when Claude Pepper ran that committee, and started in '83, and it came out as a 1986 Omnibus Budget Act. And a large part of it dealt with Social Security. One of the key parts of it was put in by, I always love this because it was Pepper and Pickle, Congressman Pickle and Congressman Pepper. The Pickle amendments. One of the Pickle amendments got through fine, the other one didn't. And that's the one that's always bothered me, because the Pickle amendment that didn't get through said that if an individual is receiving SSI, well, in Texas they get Medicaid automatically. If they start working, or if a parent retires and they start receiving benefits based on their parent or from their own record, under the POMS it says that after 24 months of receiving a benefit, they're Medicare eligible as long as they're over the age of 20. Well, Pickle had put in his first amendment that anyone who had been receiving SSI would get a month-for-month credit for that. Surprisingly, for disabled, that disappeared from the law. It didn't for widows, but it did for individuals who were on SSI, non-widow. And you can see it in the legislation, you can see it in the regulation, but you can't find it in POMS. So today they just ignore it. 1997, a family got upset because Social Security decided to count the room and board that we've already talked about, the in-kind support, the 1/3 rule, got upset about that and took Social Security to court and won through appeal. It's called the Diaz case. The Diaz case said that as long as an individual paid their parents at least 1/3 of the federal benefit rate, which is $245, they would get a full benefit. So you didn't have to go through all the calculation of adding the mortgage and the insurance and the garbage and all of that. It's a clear-cut win. It won in district, and it won at every level. And it was only for this 7th region, which is Dallas region. It's a Dallas region only law. To this day, they have ignored that law. You look on the page in the Palms, and that's the only page that is always printed in kind of a light burnt auburn color. I never understood the meaning of that. But it's a different color, but they ignore it. And I have spent many an hour in Baltimore asking, why don't you get on your regional people? And their answer is, they got enough to do. We let them pretty much handle their areas. And they do. So you can argue all day long. This is the Bible as it relates to the plan, even though there may be some things in here, although I read through it, Stephen Dale has read through it, Chris, everyone that I've spoken to that I trust has not found a contradictory definition. So far we're good. What I'm concerned about is as the plan grows, let's say they take it to 28,000, which is one of the bills. Matter of fact, I really need glasses. The two major bills, this was before the other three were added. This is one of the new ones. Let's say you had set up a 529C for your child. This bill would allow you to roll that completely into the 529A without having any impact on the 14,000 limit. That should have passed last year. And the able to work, this is really where it starts to get, in my mind, dicey with Social Security. An able account beneficiary, this is a working person, can make a contribution to an able account equal to the lesser of that beneficiary's compensation, or an amount equal to the federal poverty line for one person a household, and get a retirement savings tax credit for contributions for such. Now, they can't do anything about second part, because that's IRS. But to be able to say, Johnny is working and making $1,300 a month, And now he's going to be able to have his employer potentially send $1,100 to his ABEL and still get a credit, and it doesn't interfere with the $14,000. That's where Social Security, I think, starts to get more involved. The other new laws coming on are the doubling to $28,000, and the other two are not major improvements, but they're having to do with reporting. But as I say, so far, you know, they're running the system that this bill was put in place to affect. And they have so far not had any ability other than to write the POMs, which are, from our reading, totally consistent with what we understand the rules are. Now, if any of you open an ABEL account, you need to print this off, these 10 pages, because I can guarantee you that you're going to get some sort of letter because a lot of these folks have not heard of the ABEL account. You know, they've spent the last 2 years on a crash course on special needs trusts, and now they're trying to fix the backlog on claims that have gone unmanaged. So they have no idea about this. So you write on your annual statement, you know, you got 16,000 in an Ohio account, you're going to get a summons to the office. And you're going to take this, because all these blue lines, these are the little sub-rules. These tell them what they need to do. This one takes them to a form that they have to fill out. So you need to carry this if you open an ABEL account, and help them understand what it is they're looking at. Has anyone in here had to have their special needs trust reviewed? No. They're on a crash course. We probably had 100 clients that have had to resubmit trusts that have already been approved for reapproval. And you know, they're just getting tougher to deal with. Nothing's changed in the law, but they seem to go in fits and spurts on stuff like this. This again has nothing to do with ABEL. Any of you have kids on either HCS or class? CDS? Do you get paid? Adult foster care?
Is other people, like other people?
So do either of you get money for watching your own kid?
We have class. My son's 20, but no.
Okay. Well, there is a program that came about called Client Directed Services, CDS, and Adult Foster Care, which actually would pay a parent to be their child's caregiver. And why would they do that? They do that because so many parents were finding it impossible to find somebody that they would trust walking out the door and driving away, leaving their kid with. And so they finally said, well, okay, we'll just pay the parent. And then of course it gets more complicated. Well, can we have a relative? We go through some of that. Maybe yes. And then we get to the question of, well, is that money taxable? Initially, if it was paid to a parent, it was tax-free. Then the IRS came in and said, whoa, no, it's taxable. That lasted about 2 years. And then they came back in 2014 and they said, okay, never mind. If it's to a parent, it's going to be tax-free. And if it's to a relative who is licensed to the level of care necessary, it will also be tax-free. And most folks know about that. Most providers know about that. What they don't know about, and what we just ran across by accident, was this, what's called acquiescence ruling, that says if in doing that work and getting paid, if you are either an independent contractor or if your child is actually the CDS, considered the client-directed services provider, which happens, not only is the income tax-free, but there is no deduction for Medicare or FICA. That's what's new. And that's a lot of money. And so that's what this section talks about, and it was a shock to find this. It was like it was left out of the original set of regs, so they let you go back 3 years. And you know, families, the average payment is $2,800 a month. You do the math, 3 years, $2,800 a month at whatever, 12.7 or 13, whatever it is combined. That's a lot of money. So I throw this in at every place we run into. The only time it's not is if you are employed by the actual provider, the middleman. So that was just kind of a freebie in case. So back to where we started. You've got a little bit of history. You've got some high points, the pluses, minuses. You've got 3 or 4 reasoned ideas that we put out. You've got some very in-depth thinking from Dale in California. You've got Chris comparing ABEL and a special needs trust. How do they work together? What can you do with the two to really make it sing? You can look at the tax form to see what the IRS says that you need to do. You've got the regular deductions. You've got 2 links that you should go to and get signed up to get updates. Read through, because they have some additional stuff. You've got the booklet from Ohio, and again, that was a choice just made on the simplicity, the directness, in going up there and visiting with those folks and getting just a good vibe It's the same vibe I'd get when I go to Austin to the Arc Master Pool Trust. Just a great bunch of people that are very professional and really know what they're doing. That's the vibe we got. You've got the palms that you're going to print off and memorize. And if you open an account, make sure you have a copy of that if you get called in for an explanation. And then the last one is none of you are in that situation. That's really, see, when I started out, I said this is massive. There's just no way to condense all this into some sort of PowerPoint that does it justice. The historical view, yeah, I mean, that's kind of fun, but to me, this talks about the power of one, advocacy. This, the full name of it is Stephen Beckett. Stephen Beckett was a young man from Virginia. I've already said the fellow that wrote it was from South Florida, but he had a constituent from Miami whose brother lived in Fairfax, Virginia. And that's what started it. The two couples went to Representative Crenshaw's office and said, it just doesn't seem right. Just doesn't seem right. And it must be something that you can do. If we could just set up an account, something like we do with our other kids for college. And that's where the 529 started to buzz around, and Crenshaw and his wonderful staff. And then they got some other folks like myself involved who understood where the, as they called it, where the rubber meets the road. What are the problems that families have at the local level? And then we started to prioritize, just like a card game. Okay, you know, we've got our cards close, and you know, are you willing to give up just having cash only? Yeah. I mean, we threw that one away early. Didn't matter, you know, but it was a throwaway. You know, how low are you willing to go? I said 250, but it just got too intense. And so as the process went on, it finally took this shape, and it really, as is, contains 4 or 5 wonderful tools that can make a significant difference in a child's life. And it started with these two couples going to one congressman who, as good as Andrew Crenshaw has been for 20 years, he's not a name that you would know. If I said Andrew Crenshaw, you'd think tennis player, golfer, you know. But this one unassuming congressman, and you know, first thing we did is we went around and knocked on every Texan's representative door. Every one of them. And we got 6. You know, that was our start. Then we went to Florida. And, but it started with this 2 couples. And this is what we get, you know? And so I had a lady ask me the other day, she said, you know, I'm about to retire, and I just want to do something, but I just feel like I can't it really wouldn't make a difference. And I told her the story about the Stephen Beckett rule, how it started. And I think I went a little overboard. She's moving to Washington. You know, she wants to make a difference. But that's what can happen with that type of power, ability to get out and do the stuff. I'm not going to go through any of this, but we've been doing planning for 34 years. We have a wonderful group of consortium members that can deal with just about every issue that a family can face. And we work well together. And if you have done planning and you want to review it, or you haven't done planning and you want to find out what it takes to do a plan, like I said, we offer you 60, 90 minutes, no cost, briefing, and listen to your story, and you're going to leave with something. You know, you may end up saying, don't want to work with them, or don't need to do any more than what we've done, but everybody leaves with something, because there are just so many pieces. I've yet to see any plan that is just wrapped up tight, perfect. So, you know, take us up on it. If any of you have questions about any of this, you've got my contact information. And as they say, stick a fork in me, I'm done. Thank you all for being here.